Is Tua Tagovailoa's Miami career already on life support? The brutal timeline for moving on from a $212 million mistake. How quickly can an NFL franchise admit they made a catastrophic contract mistake and move on? How long does a quarterback get to prove he's worth $212 million when the team around him is cratering and the offense he's supposed to elevate ranks 21st in scoring? And most importantly, when does patience stop being prudent and start being organizational malpractice? For the Miami Dolphins and Tua Tagovailoa, those questions aren't hypothetical anymore. They're becoming the defining narrative of the season that's spiraling out of control at an alarming pace. At 1-4 with their playoff hopes already circling the drain, the Dolphins are facing uncomfortable truths about their franchise quarterback and the massive financial commitment they made to him just over a year ago. Tua Tagovailoa carries a staggering $39.1 million cap hit in 2025 and a mind-boggling $56.4 million hit in 2026. Numbers that would be justifiable if he were consistently carrying Miami to victories and playoff appearances. Instead, he's quarterback in offense that ranks 21st in scoring despite being coached by Mike McDaniel, the supposed offensive genius who is going to unlock Tua's full potential and turn Miami into an unstoppable force. Sports Illustrated's Albert Breer recently weighed in on Tagovailoa's job security, and his analysis is both fascinating and brutal in its practicality. According to Breer, Miami won't, and realistically can't, move on from Tua before 2027 at the earliest, regardless of how this season ends or who's running the organization by then. The reason is painfully simple. Money. Tagovailoa has $54 million in fully guaranteed money for 2026, meaning the Dolphins would essentially be flushing that entire amount down the toilet if they tried moving on before then. No franchise, no matter how desperate or dysfunctional, voluntarily absorbs a $54 million dead money hit unless there's absolutely no alternative. But here's where it gets interesting and where Dolphins fans should start getting genuinely concerned. After the 2026 season, Miami's financial obligations to Tagovailoa drop off a cliff. They'd owe just $3 million in dead money if they cut him after next year, making 2027 the earliest realistic opportunity to move on without crippling the franchise financially. That timeline means Tua essentially has this season and next season to prove he's worth a massive investment, or he'll be playing elsewhere in 2027. The clock isn't just ticking, it's screaming. Let's be crystal clear about what's happening here. The Dolphins are trapped. They signed Tagovailoa to a 4-year, $212 million extension in July 2024, right before the season started. Mind you, based on his 2024 performance where he led the NFL in completion percentage and looked like a genuine franchise quarterback. That decision seemed defensible at the time. Tua had shown marked improvement. The offense was explosive. The future looked bright. But one mediocre season and a handful of concerning performances later, and that contract extension is starting to look like one of the worst decisions in recent franchise history. The statistics this season tell a complicated story. Tagovailoa has completed passes at an elite rate once again, sitting near the top of the league in completion percentage. He's thrown for 1,008 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions through 5 games, numbers that look perfectly respectable on the surface. If you squint hard enough and ignore everything else, you could convince yourself that Tua is playing reasonably well, and the team's failures are coming from elsewhere. But that interpretation requires ignoring some glaring context that makes those numbers far less impressive than they appear. First, Miami's offense ranks 21st in scoring despite having one of the most creative offensive minds in football, calling plays. Mike McDaniel was supposed to be the perfect coach for Tagovailoa, someone who could scheme receivers open, create favorable matchups, and design a system that maximized Tua's accuracy and quick release while minimizing his physical limitations. Instead, the offense looks predictable, struggles to generate explosive plays, and consistently fails to put up points against competent defenses. That's a damning indictment of either the quarterback, the coach, or both. Second, Tagovailoa's performance in critical moments continues raising red flags. When Miami needs him to make difficult throws into tight windows, extend plays with his legs, or deliver under pressure from elite pass rushers, he consistently comes up short. His physical limitations, average arm strength, limited mobility, concerning durability issues become glaring weaknesses when the opposition game plans specifically to exploit them. Good quarterbacks overcome their physical limitations through elite decision-making and clutch performance. Great quarterbacks don't have significant physical limitations to overcome. Tua falls somewhere in the middle, and middle isn't worth $212 million. The injury history looms large over everything with Tagovailoa. He suffered multiple concussions during his NFL career, each one raising serious questions about his long-term health and ability to withstand the physical punishment of playing quarterback at the highest level. The Dolphins have tried implementing protocols to protect him, but you can't eliminate contact in football, and Tua's history makes every hit a potential career ender. That's not his fault, but it's absolutely relevant when evaluating whether he's worth the massive financial commitment Miami made. You can't pay franchise quarterback money to someone who might not finish the season, regardless of how talented they are when healthy. Breer's analysis about the 2026 season being crucial is absolutely correct, but also reveals the organizational dysfunction at play here. If you're Miami's front office, you're essentially admitting that you signed a quarterback to a massive extension, knowing there was a realistic possibility you want to move on from him just 2 years later. That's catastrophic asset management. That's the kind of decision that gets general managers fired and franchises set back half a decade. Chris Grier, Miami's GM, bet his job on Tagovailoa being the long-term answer, and that bet is looking increasingly shaky with each passing week. The coaching situation makes everything more complicated. Mike McDaniel's seat is scorching hot after back-to-back disappointing seasons and a disastrous start to 2025. When Miami fires McDaniel, the new coach might not want Tagovailoa as his quarterback. New coaches almost always prefer selecting their own signal caller rather than inheriting someone else's choice, especially when that someone comes with a massive contract and significant baggage. But the financial realities mean the new coach would be stuck with Tua for at least one season, creating a potentially toxic situation where the quarterback and coach aren't aligned from day one. Breer's point about Miami potentially drafting a quarterback in April 2026 while keeping Tagovailoa as a transition guy is particularly fascinating because it reveals the most likely scenario. Miami hedging their bets by bringing in competition while seeing if Tua can salvage his job. That's the quarterback purgatory that destroys franchises. You're not fully committed to your current guy, but you're not ready to move on either. So you spend a year in limbo while everyone involved feels uncomfortable and the locker room fractures. It's organizational cowardice masquerading as prudent planning. The comparison to other recent quarterback contracts makes Miami's situation even more painful. Look at what Jacksonville did with Trevor Lawrence. 5 years, $275 million with $200 million guaranteed. That's a bigger commitment than Tua's deal, but Lawrence has infinitely higher upside and far fewer concerning weaknesses. Or look at Jalen Hurts in Philadelphia. 5 years, $255 million after he carried the Eagles to a Super Bowl. These are the kind of quarterbacks who deserve massive extensions. Tagovailoa got paid like a top 5 quarterback based on one good season completion percentage and the hope that he might someday become that caliber of player. The brutal reality is that Miami probably knows they made a mistake. They probably realized it halfway through last season when Tua started showing the same limitations that plagued him earlier in his career. But admitting the mistake publicly means accepting organizational failure, absorbing massive financial penalties, and essentially punting on 2 to 3 years of potential competitiveness while you rebuild. That's a tough pill to swallow for an ownership group that's already invested heavily in trying to win now. So instead, they'll keep riding with Tua, hoping somehow the situation magically improves, even though nothing about performance or the team's trajectory suggests that's remotely realistic. The next 12 games will define Tagovailoa's future in Miami more than any previous stretch of his career. If the Dolphins somehow rally and finish strong, say 9-8 or 10-7 and sneak into the playoffs, then Tua probably gets a reprieve and McDaniel keeps his job. But if Miami continues cratering and finishes 4-13 or 5-12, which looks increasingly likely given their schedule and current form, then everyone's job security evaporates. The ownership will clean house, bring in new leadership, and that new regime will spend 2026 evaluating whether Tagovailoa is worth keeping beyond his guaranteed money, or if they're better off eating the dead cap and moving on. The most damning aspect of this entire situation is that Tagovailoa hasn't done anything egregiously wrong this season. He's not throwing 5 interceptions per game. He's not getting benched for poor performance.